Her billionaire CEO husband and her daughter shut her out of their lives. 7 years later, she shocked them. The champagne glass slipped from his trembling fingers. The sound of crystal shattering against marble echoed through the auditorium like a gunshot. 700 people turned to look. 700 witnesses to the moment Damien Cross, billionaire architectural mogul, the man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, the man who had fired executives without blinking, stood completely frozen. The color draining from his face like someone had opened a valve. His hands began to shake, actually trembling, visibly, uncontrollably, because standing at the back of the auditorium, in a dress the color of emeralds that caught the light like liquid fire, was a woman he thought he had erased from existence 7 years ago. "Isla," he whispered, and the word came out broken, barely human. She said nothing, just stood there, calm and still, her silver-streaked hair swept back elegantly, her face composed, revealing absolutely nothing. And somehow, her silence was more devastating than any words could have been. "You came," he said louder now, his voice cracking. "I didn't think. I never thought. You asked me to come," she replied, her tone neutral, measured, giving him nothing to work with. "So I came." Around them, whispers erupted like wildfire. "She's here. The wife who disappeared. The woman who walked away. She's actually here." At the front of the auditorium, another figure appeared, a young woman in an elegant suit, glowing with pre-ceremony confidence. Vivian Cross, daughter, rising star, tonight's award recipient. She was scanning the crowd with a practiced smile until her eyes landed on the woman in emerald at the back of the room. The smile vanished instantly. Color drained from her face. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp of shock. "Mom," she whispered, but in the sudden silence of the auditorium, the word carried like an accusation. "You're here. You actually came." "Hello, Vivian," Isla said quietly, her voice steady as stone. "Congratulations on your award." Vivian's hands began to shake, her award acceptance speech trembling in her grip. "I don't deserve this," she said, tears already gathering in her eyes. "I don't deserve you here. I don't deserve any of this. But here's what you need to understand before we get to how we arrived at this moment. Here's what you need to know about Isla Moreau. 7 years before this night, she had been erased. Not killed, not divorced and discarded. Erased, made invisible in her own life by the two people who should have loved her most. Her billionaire husband had stolen her work, claimed her genius as his, owned and built an empire on the foundation of her brilliance while reducing her to nothing more than support at home. And her daughter, her own flesh and blood, had helped him do it. For months, they had ignored her, dismissed her, treated her like furniture in rooms she had designed, until one morning, Isla Moreau walked out of her luxury penthouse with 3 suitcases and disappeared into a city that didn't know her name, and neither her husband nor her daughter had called, not once, not to apologize, not to ask where she was, not to check if she was even alive. For 7 years, silence. But tonight, everything was about to shatter. If you have ever felt invisible in your own life, if you have ever given everything to people who took it all, without seeing you, if you have ever had to rebuild yourself from absolute nothing, this story is for you. Hit that like button right now and let me know in the comments if you have ever had to walk away from people who could not see your worth. And subscribe to Mr. Hearthline Stories, because we tell stories about real strength, real survival, and the power of knowing your own value even when everyone else is blind to it. Now let me take you back. Let me show you how a brilliant woman became invisible. Let me show you what it looks like when erasure happens so slowly you don't realize you're disappearing until you're already gone. 7 years earlier, the conference room smelled of leather and expensive cologne and ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like it was a painting someone had commissioned specifically for this space. Isla Moreau sat at the far end of the sleek glass table, her portfolio closed in front. Of her, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale beneath her brown skin. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, perfecting the presentation, going over every detail, every calculation, every innovative solution she had spent 18 months developing. The sustainable housing complex that would revolutionize affordable urban living, modular construction that reduced costs by 40%, solar grids woven into the structural framework, water reclamation systems that could serve entire communities, Green spaces integrated so seamlessly that residents would live surrounded by nature even in the heart of the city. Her vision, her design, her soul translated into blueprints and renderings. On the screen behind Damien Cross, her husband, those very designs were being presented to a room full of investors. Men in expensive suits, women with tablets and sharp eyes, people who controlled the kind of money that could turn vision into reality. As you can see, Damien said smoothly, his voice carrying that particular confidence that comes from never being told no. This project represents a quantum leap forward in sustainable development. The integration of vertical gardens, the modular construction methodology, the revolutionary solar framework. This isn't just architecture. This is the future of urban living. The investors nodded, murmuring approval. Someone asked about load-bearing calculations. Another questioned the construction timeline. Damien answered everything perfectly, smoothly, completely, because Isla had spent 3 nights preparing detailed notes for him, had explained every technical aspect until he could recite it like scripture. Not once did he say her name. Not once did anyone look at her. She had been sitting in this room for 47 minutes, and she was completely invisible. Isla cleared her throat softly. "If I could add something about the water reclamation system," she began, her voice quiet but clear. "The technical specifications, actually. We'll get to granular details later," Damien interrupted without even glancing in her direction. "Right now, let's focus on the vision, the big picture." Her vision, her big picture, her 18 months of work condensed into his 10-minute performance. Across the table, Vivian Cross, their daughter, 23 years old and sharp as broken glass, typed notes into her tablet. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her mother's attempt to speak, just kept her eyes on the screen, on her father, on anything except the woman who had given birth to her. The meeting concluded 40 minutes later with handshakes and promises. Damien accepted congratulations with practiced humility, the kind that somehow made him seem even more impressive. "We're very excited to move forward with this," he said, and the "we" somehow managed to exclude the woman who had designed every single inch of it. When the investors filed out, still talking among themselves, still impressed, Isla remained seated. The silence in the conference room felt thick enough to choke on. "Damien," she said quietly, her voice carefully controlled, "we need to talk about attribution." He was gathering his presentation materials, barely listening. The presentation. My name wasn't mentioned once. None of my contributions were acknowledged." Damien sighed, the kind of sigh you give a child who is asking why the sky is blue for the 15th time. "Isla, we've discussed this before. In this business, it's about brand recognition, cross-development. That's what investors trust. That's what sells. Cross-development was built on my designs," Isla said, her voice still quiet but with an edge now. "Our designs," he corrected, finally looking at her. His eyes were cold, assessing, the way he looked at properties he was considering demolishing. "You handle the creative work. I handle the business. That's how partnerships function. That's how successful firms operate. I'm not asking for sole credit," Isla said, feeling something twist in her chest. "I'm asking for acknowledgement. My name on the presentation, a mention during the pitch, basic professional courtesy." Vivian looked up from her tablet then. The expression on her face made Isla's breath catch. It was contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. Her own daughter was looking at her like she was something distasteful. "Mother," Vivian said, and the words somehow sounded like an insult. "Maybe if you understood the business side of architecture, you would realize how optics work. Investors want confidence. They want singular vision. They want a leader, not a committee. They don't want to hear about collaborative processes and shared credit." "I'm not asking to be positioned as the leader," Isla said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm asking to be seen." "Perhaps," Damien said, closing his leather briefcase with a decisive click that sounded like a gavel, "you should focus on what you're actually good at. The designing, the creative work. Let me handle how we present it to the world. Let me handle the business relationships. That's what I do best." He left the conference room. Vivian followed without a backward glance, already on her phone, already moving on to whatever was next. Isla sat alone, surrounded by the ghost of her own work still projected on screens, and felt something inside her crack. That was month 1. By month 3, they had stopped including her in meetings entirely. "You don't need to be there," Damien had said when she questioned it. "It's mostly financial talk, investor relations, Boring business minutia. You would hate it. But she could hear them sometimes. Through the walls of the penthouse they shared. Could hear Damien's voice rising and falling as he discussed strategy. Could hear Vivian's laughter, bright and engaged, as she participated in conversations about the future of the firm. Their firm, the firm Isla had helped build from nothing. She would stand in the hallway sometimes, listening to them plan projects she knew nothing about, discuss ideas she had never heard, make decisions about work that carried her fingerprints but no longer her name. Month 4 brought the magazine feature that changed everything. Isla found it on the kitchen counter one morning. Architectural Digest. The cover featured a striking photo of Damien in his office, city skyline behind him, looking every inch the visionary genius. The headline read, Damien Cross, the man reshaping urban living. She made coffee with shaking hands and sat down to read it. The article was 7 pages long, glowing, effusive praise for his innovative approach, his sustainable vision, his revolutionary designs. Every single project mentioned was hers. The affordable housing complex with integrated green spaces, the modular construction technique, the solar grid innovation, the water reclamation systems, her work, her vision, her innovations, all described in meticulous detail and attributed entirely to Damien Cross. There was one mention of her, buried in paragraph 8, easy to miss. Cross credits his wife, Isla, for maintaining a supportive home environment. That allows him to focus fully on his groundbreaking work, supportive home environment. 20 years of architectural brilliance reduced to domestic cheerleading. Isla read that line 7 times, each reading feeling like a knife sliding between her ribs. She was still sitting there, magazine open, coffee gone cold, when Damien came into the kitchen 2 hours later, already dressed for another meeting she wasn't invited to. Did you see the article? He asked, pleased with himself. Great exposure for the firm. I saw it, Isla said quietly. The photos turned out well, didn't they? James is an excellent photographer. Really captured the aesthetic I was going for. Damien, Isla said, her voice very carefully controlled. This article, everything in here, every project they mention, every innovation they praise, it's my work. He was pouring coffee, not really listening. It's our work. The firm's work. No, Isla stood up, the magazine clenched in her hands. It's my work, my designs, my innovations, and I'm credited with maintaining a supportive home environment. You do maintain a supportive home environment, Damien said, finally looking at her with genuine confusion, like he couldn't understand why she was upset. That's important. That's valuable. I'm an architect, Isla said, and her voice was shaking now despite her best efforts. I have 2 degrees. I have 20 years of experience. I have designed every single project this article praises you for, and I'm reduced to a footnote about being supportive at home. You're overreacting, Damien said, his voice cooling, irritation creeping in. It's one article, one piece of press. It doesn't diminish your contributions. It erases them, Isla said. It erases me. It's marketing, Damien said. And now his voice had that edge of annoyance, the tone he used when he was done with the conversation. Isla, you're brilliant at what you do. No one disputes that. But you don't understand public perception. You don't understand branding. The Cross name sells. My reputation, built over decades, sells. That's reality. Reality, Isla repeated. What about my reality? What about my work? Is protected by my name, Damien said. You should be grateful. Your designs get built because of my reputation, because of the trust I've established, because of the relationships I've cultivated. Without that infrastructure, your ideas would stay on paper. Grateful. The word hung in the air between them like poison. You want me to be grateful, Isla said slowly, for being erased from my own work. I want you to understand how business works, Damien said. I want you to be realistic about how the world operates. And frankly, I want you to stop making problems out of non-issues. This is how successful firms function. This is how we've always operated. He left, coffee in hand, off to another meeting about another project she probably designed, but would never be credited for. Isla stood in their designer kitchen, in their penthouse apartment, surrounded by luxury. She had helped pay for with work nobody knew was hers, and felt herself disappearing. Month 6 brought Vivian moving into the guest wing of the penthouse. I want to work more closely with Dad, she had announced over breakfast one morning. Really learn the business side. Get hands-on experience before I take on more responsibility at the firm. Your firm, Isla had said quietly. You mean our firm? Vivian had looked at her with those cold eyes, so much like her father's. Sure, Mom. Our firm. She moved in that weekend, took over the entire guest wing with its own entrance, its own living space, its own world that didn't include Isla. Mother and daughter lived in the same apartment and became strangers. They passed each other in hallways without speaking. Vivian stopped joining family dinners, claiming she and Damien were working. Stopped answering when Isla called. Stopped acknowledging that the woman who had raised her, who had taught her to sketch when she was 5 years old, who had nurtured her love of architecture, even existed. Isla would hear them late at night, father and daughter, laughing together in Damien's office, discussing projects, making plans, living entire lives that had no room for her in them. She tried confronting Vivian once, caught her daughter in the kitchen early one morning before Damien was awake. Vivian, she had said, we need to talk about what's happening, about this distance between us. Vivian had looked up from her phone with an expression of mild annoyance. What's happening, she said, is that I'm learning the business, learning how to run a successful firm, learning from someone who actually understands how this world works. I understand how this world works, Isla had said. I've been an architect for 20 years. You've been a designer for 20 years, Vivian corrected. There's a difference. Designers create. Architects build empires. And if you can't understand that distinction, maybe that's why your name isn't on the projects. The cruelty of it had stolen Isla's breath. This was her daughter, her child, the girl she had rocked to sleep, the teenager she had supported through every challenge, the young woman she had been so proud of. And that young woman was looking at her like she was nothing. Month 7 arrived with an invitation to the Architectural Innovation Awards Gala. Damien Cross was being honored for pioneering work in sustainable urban development. The same sustainable urban development Isla had actually pioneered. He was receiving an award for her work. You'll come, of course, he had said. It wasn't a question. Black tie. The whole firm will be there. Isla had designed her dress herself. Midnight blue. Elegant. Understated. She had thought, hoped, that maybe tonight he would acknowledge her. Maybe on stage, receiving an award for her innovations, he would say her name, would give her even the smallest recognition, would remember that the work being celebrated had come from her mind, her hands, her soul. The gala was held at the plaza. Chandeliers and champagne. Manhattan's architectural elite in designer gowns and custom suits. Isla stood in the ballroom wearing her midnight blue dress and watched her husband work the room. He was magnetic, charming. Everyone wanted to talk to Damien Cross. Everyone wanted proximity to his success. No one looked at the woman standing slightly behind him. When his name was called, when he walked to the stage to accept the award, Isla felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. This was the moment. Surely he would acknowledge her now. Surely in front of everyone who mattered he would tell the truth. Damien gave a 12-minute acceptance speech. He thanked the awards committee. He thanked his investors. He thanked the construction teams and the planning departments and the city officials who had made these projects possible. He thanked Vivian for bringing fresh perspective and innovative thinking to Cross development. He thanked his family in one brief generic sentence that could have meant anyone or no one. He never said Isla's name. Not once. She stood in that ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, and applauded. She clapped along with everyone else while her husband accepted an award for work she had created. She smiled when people offered congratulations. She nodded when someone said how proud she must be. And something inside her, something that had been cracking for 7 months, finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way anyone could see. It was a quiet, internal collapse, like a building imploding from within, controlled, complete, devastating. Month 8 arrived with winter. Isla woke up one morning in the bed she no longer shared with Damien. He had moved to the master suite's connected bedroom months ago, claiming her restlessness disturbed his sleep. She lay there in the early darkness, listening to the city wake up beyond the windows, and realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had truly looked at her. She got up, made coffee, went through her morning routine like always. Damien left for the office at 7 without speaking to her. Vivian grabbed a protein shake at 7:30, earbuds in, eyes on her phone, and left without acknowledging her mother's existence. The housekeeper arrived at 8 and cleaned around Isla like she was furniture. By noon, Isla hadn't spoken a single word out loud. No one had needed to hear her voice. No one had asked her opinion or wanted her input or cared what she thought. She was simply there, taking up space in an apartment full of people who had learned to see right through her. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror that evening and barely recognized herself. When had her shoulders started curving inward like that? When had her eyes taken on that hollow look? When had she learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less? The woman in the mirror looked like a ghost, and Isla realized with sudden, terrible clarity that she had already disappeared. Walking out would just make it official. That night, she began planning her escape. She couldn't take much. The prenuptial agreement she had signed 24 years ago when she was young and in love, and stupid enough to believe marriage meant partnership. That document protected everything. The apartment, the firm, the assets, all of it was in Damien's name or protected by corporate structures she had no claim to. She had signed away her rights to everything, including her own work, because he had told her it was standard, because he had told her it was just paperwork, because she had trusted him. She had 3 suitcases. She packed them carefully. Clothes, a few personal items, her laptop with years of designs saved on it, photographs of her mother, who had passed away years ago, a journal she used to write in before she forgot she had thoughts worth recording, a small wooden box her father had made for her when she was a child. Everything that mattered to her fit into 3 suitcases. Everything she had built, everything she had created, everything she had given. To cross development over 20 years, she would have to leave behind. On her last morning, Isla woke before dawn. She dressed quietly. She took her 3 suitcases downstairs, moving silently through the penthouse that had never really felt like home. In the kitchen, she stopped at the counter. She twisted her wedding ring off her finger, feeling the groove it had worn into her skin over 24 years of marriage. The gold caught the early morning light. She placed it next to the coffee maker, right where Damien would see it when he came down. Let him find it there. Let him understand that she had left willingly, that she had chosen to go rather than continue disappearing. She didn't leave a note. What was there to say? They had made their feelings clear through 8 months of perfect erasure. Words would be redundant. Isla picked up her suitcases, took one last look at the space she was leaving behind, and walked out the front door. The November air was cold against her face. The city was just beginning to wake up. Somewhere, delivery trucks were making their rounds. Somewhere, early commuters were heading to work. The world was continuing to turn, completely indifferent to her pain. And somehow that was comforting. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She just put one foot in front of the other and walked away from everything she had ever known, carrying nothing but 3 suitcases and a dignity so battered it barely qualified as intact. Behind her, the penthouse remained silent. Damien and Vivian were still asleep. They would wake up in a few hours, would come downstairs expecting breakfast, would find an empty kitchen and a wedding ring on the counter. But by then, Isla would be gone, already disappearing into a future she would have to build completely alone. The first week after leaving was survival. Nothing more, nothing less. Isla found herself in a studio apartment in Queens. She had enough money from their joint account to cover first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit with almost nothing left over. The apartment was smaller than her walk-in closet had been in the penthouse. 1 room, a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge. A bathroom so tiny you could touch both walls while sitting on the toilet. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbors' conversations, their televisions, their arguments, the sounds of lives being lived all around her. This was what freedom looked like when you had nothing. The mattress was lumpy and smelled faintly of the previous tenant. The window looked out on an alley where dumpsters overflowed and stray cats searched for food. The radiator clanked and hissed but barely produced heat. Isla sat on the edge of that mattress her first night, surrounded by her 3 suitcases, and tried to figure out what came next. She had no job, no references she could use without alerting Damien to where she was, no professional network separate from cross-development. For 20 years, her entire career had been subsumed into his firm. Her designs had his name on them. Her innovations were credited to him. She had no portfolio she could claim as her own. She was 47 years old, and she was starting from less than 0. The silence from them was absolute. No calls, no texts, No emails. No lawyers reaching out about separation agreements. No private investigators tracking her down. Nothing. She had lived with Damien for 24 years, had been his wife, his creative partner, the mother of his child, and her disappearance didn't even register as an event worth responding to. She had been so thoroughly erased that her physical absence barely made a ripple. Vivian's silence cut even deeper. No call asking where her mother had gone. No message expressing concern. No daughter wondering if her mom was safe, alive, okay. Just void. Blank and complete. On day 4, Isla walked into a small community architecture firm in Brooklyn. Rahman and Associates operated out of a converted brownstone. The lobby was modest. Worn furniture. Plants that looked real, not decorative. Framed sketches on the walls instead of glossy renderings. Kamal Rahman was in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses and eyes that saw too much. He looked at Isla's resume, what little of it she could claim without, mentioning cross-development, and studied her for a long moment. "You're overqualified for what we pay," he said. His voice carried the faint accent of someone who had immigrated young, but never quite lost the rhythm of another language. "I need the work," Isla said honestly. "You running from something. Rebuilding from something," she corrected. Kamal nodded slowly. "Everybody who walks through that door is rebuilding from something. That's why they end up here instead of the big firms." He handed her resume back. "When can you start?" "Now." He smiled. "Tomorrow is fine." The work at Rahman and Associates was humble. Small residential renovations, local business redesigns, community center expansions. Nothing that would make magazines. Nothing that would change skylines. Nothing that carried prestige or commanded attention. But it was honest. Her name went on the blueprints. When clients had questions, Kamal sent them directly to her. When projects succeeded, he praised her work publicly, in front of the whole small team. It was the first time in years anyone had actually seen her. Isla worked brutal hours because work filled the void and kept her mind occupied. She learned to cook for one after years of catered meals and private chefs. She learned a budget after years of unlimited accounts. She learned to ride the subway instead of taking car services. She learned to do her own laundry, her own shopping, her own everything. Some nights, lying in her lumpy bed listening to her neighbors through paper-thin walls, she cried. Quiet tears that soaked her pillow while she grieved not for Damien. That love had died slowly over years of neglect, but for Vivian, for the daughter who had learned cruelty from her father, for the relationship that had been poisoned beyond recognition. But most nights, she simply worked, sketched, designed, reclaimed the part of herself that had always been true, even when everything else was being stripped away. Can I ask you something? Have you ever had to start over from zero? Have you ever had to rebuild your entire life after people you loved made you invisible? Drop a comment and tell me your story, because every single person watching this right now has survived something hard. And if this story is hitting home, if Isla's struggle feels familiar, smash that subscribe button. You're part of the Mr. Hearthline family now, and we're all rebuilding something. Year 2 brought unexpected growth. Kamal had asked Isla to design a community library for a struggling neighborhood in the Bronx. Pro bono work, no budget to speak of. Just a community that needed a space for their kids to read, to study, to exist somewhere safe and quiet. Not everything is about profit, Kamal had said when assigning the project. Sometimes architecture is about serving people who have been overlooked by everyone else. Isla had taken the project and poured herself into it. The space was small. The budget was non-existent. But she designed something beautiful anyway. A library that maximized every square foot. That brought in natural light through cleverly placed windows. That created cozy reading nooks and open study spaces and quiet corners where kids could just be kids. She used affordable materials in innovative ways, made this space warm and welcoming and full of possibility. When it opened, the community celebrated. Local news covered the opening. Parents brought their children. Teenagers who had nowhere to go after school suddenly had a place that was theirs. And a blogger who wrote about accessible architecture featured it in a piece about design with soul. The article mentioned her name, Isla Moreau, not Damien Cross, not Cross Development, her. Her phone rang the next day. A woman from a nonprofit that worked with low-income housing. She had seen the library. She had read about Isla's approach. Could Isla help them design affordable housing that didn't look like affordable housing, that treated residents with dignity, That created community instead of warehousing poverty. Yes, Isla had said. Yes, I can help. Then another call came. And another, slowly, carefully, like spring arriving after a brutal winter. Isla Moreau began building a reputation separate from everything she had lost. Not built on luxury high-rises or landmark buildings. Not built on prestige or magazine covers. But built on structures that served people who had been told they didn't matter enough for good design. She found purpose in the work. Found meaning in designing for communities that couldn't afford star architects. Found herself again in the quiet satisfaction of creating spaces that actually mattered to the people who used them. Kamal promoted her to senior architect, gave her creative freedom, trusted her judgment, treated her like the professional she had always been, but had forgotten she was allowed to be. "You're different now," he observed one afternoon, while reviewing her latest project. "When you first came here, you moved like someone expecting to be hit, like you were trying to take up as little space as possible. Now you move like someone who remembers her own strength." Isla hadn't known how to respond to that, so she had just nodded. But he was right. Something in her had straightened. Her shoulders had stopped curving inward. Her voice had stopped apologizing for existing. She had started taking up space again. Year 3 brought an unexpected friendship that changed everything. Mira Castellanos owned the cafe below Isla's apartment, a tiny place called Revive that served the best coffee in Queens and attracted an eclectic mix of artists, students, and neighborhood regulars. Mira was 10 years younger than Isla, covered in colorful tattoos, loud and profane, and incapable of pretense. "You're always alone," Mira had observed one morning, sliding an extra pastry across the counter. "That's either very peaceful or very sad. Which one is it?" "Bit of both," Isla had admitted. "Well, if it tips too far towards sad, I'm here. I'm an excellent listener. Terrible at giving advice, but excellent at listening. And I make a mean cortado." Isla had started spending mornings at Revive before heading to work. Mira talked about her girlfriend Rosa, about her family in Miami who still couldn't quite accept that their daughter was gay, about her dreams of opening a second location, about how hard it was to run a small business in a city that ate small businesses alive. Isla listened mostly, but occasionally she shared small pieces of her own story. Never the full truth, never the names, just fragments. A marriage that had ended badly. A daughter who had stopped speaking to her. A career she was rebuilding from ashes. Mira never pushed for details, never pried. Just listened and poured excellent coffee and occasionally said things like, "Anyone who couldn't see your worth is blind and stupid and doesn't deserve you." It was the kind of uncomplicated support Isla hadn't known she needed. By year 4, Isla had moved into a better apartment. Still modest, still in Queens, but with actual space. A bedroom separate from the living area. Windows that let in real light. A kitchen where she could actually cook. Room for a proper drafting table where she could work on personal projects. She cut her hair short, let the silver come in naturally, instead of covering it with dye. Started wearing clothes she chose for herself instead of clothes that would photograph well beside Damien. Started reclaiming pieces of identity that had been slowly eroded during her marriage. She dated briefly. A kind professor from the community college where she had started teaching night classes. A contractor she had worked with on a renovation project. Nothing serious. Nothing that asked for more than she was ready to give. Her heart was still too scarred for real trust, but at least it was beating again. She built a life that was smaller than her old one in terms of square footage and bank accounts and social status, but it was infinitely more hers. Every choice she made belonged to her. Every morning she woke up and decided what mattered. Every project she took on was because she wanted to, not because she had to. Maintain appearances or please investors or build someone else's empire. She taught students who couldn't afford prestigious architecture schools. She designed spaces for communities that had been overlooked. She said no to projects that didn't align with her values. She reclaimed her voice, her vision, her worth. And she thought, she hoped, that maybe she had moved on. That maybe the wound had healed enough that she could exist without the constant ache of what had been stolen from her. Then year 7 arrived, and with it, an envelope that would change everything. The envelope was thick, expensive paper, the kind that announced importance before you even opened it. Isla found it in her mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, wedged between utility bills and grocery store circulars. Her hands trembled as she recognized the logo embossed in silver on the front. The American Institute of Architecture, Young Architect of the Year awards. She should have thrown it away. Should have protected the piece she had spent 7 years building. Should have known that nothing good could come from whatever was inside. But she opened it anyway. You are cordially invited to the Young Architect of the Year award ceremony honoring this year. As recipient, Vivian Cross, for her groundbreaking work in sustainable urban development. The words blurred. Isla sat down on the floor of her apartment hallway, invitation trembling in her hands, and felt 7 years of healing crack wide open. Vivian. Her daughter was being honored for sustainable urban development, for work that Isla had pioneered, for innovations that had been stolen from her and repackaged as cross-family genius. And now Vivian was receiving awards for it. The invitation continued. A personal note has been included from the honoree. Isla unfolded the second sheet with hands that could barely grip the paper. Mother, I know I have no right to reach out. I know you probably hate me. I know I don't deserve your time or your attention or anything from you. But I need you to be there. Please, I need you to see this. I need you there. Please. Fifth. That was it. No apology. No explanation for 7 years of silence. No acknowledgement of what she and her father had done. Just a plea from a daughter who had helped erase her mother and now wanted her present for the celebration of that erasure. Isla sat on her hallway floor for 2 hours. The light changed outside her windows. The shadows lengthened. Her neighbors came and went, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. She should ignore this, should protect herself, should stay away from people who had proven they could destroy her, should maintain the boundaries she had worked so hard to build, should choose peace over pain. But something in her, something stubborn and unhealed and still bleeding after all these years, needed to see this, needed to witness what they had built on the grave of who she used to be, needed them to see what had survived their attempt to erase her. She pulled out her phone and typed a response to the RSVP email. One word, yes. The ceremony was 3 weeks away. Isla spent those weeks preparing, not preparing to confront them, not preparing to make a scene, preparing to walk into that space and remain whole, to face them and not shatter, to prove to herself that she was strong enough now. She designed a dress, emerald green silk that moved like water, elegant, understated, completely hers. She had it made by a seamstress in her neighborhood, a woman who worked miracles with fabric, and didn't ask questions about why Isla needed a gown for an architectural awards ceremony. The night before the ceremony, Mira came over with wine and moral support. You don't have to do this, you know, she said, sitting cross-legged on Isla's couch. You don't owe them anything. Not your presence. Not your forgiveness. Not anything. I know, Isla said, but I need to do this for me. I need to walk into that room and show them what they threw away. I need them to see that they didn't break me. What if it breaks you? Mira asked quietly. What if seeing them again undoes all the healing? Then I'll heal again, Isla said, but I don't think it will. I think I'm strong enough now. Mira studied her for a long moment. Yeah, she said finally. I think you are too. The morning of the ceremony, Isla woke up before dawn. She went for a run through her neighborhood, came back and showered, did her hair, applied minimal makeup, looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she barely recognized from 7 years ago. This woman had silver-streaked hair she wore with pride. This woman had lines around her eyes from laughing with students and co-workers. This woman had calluses on her hands from actually building models instead of just directing others. This woman stood straight, took up space, existed without apology. This woman had survived. Isla put on the emerald dress. It fit perfectly. She looked powerful. Not in the way Damien had always valued, all expensive labels and strategic presentation, but powerful in her own right, in her own truth. She took the subway into Manhattan, rode with commuters and tourists and people living their lives, emerged at 57th Street, and walked the last few blocks to the Meridian Center. The building was all glass and dramatic angles, the kind of architectural landmark that made statements. People were already arriving, designer gowns and custom tuxedos, Manhattan's architectural elite gathering to celebrate one of their own. Isla stood across the street for 5 full minutes watching them file in. She could still leave, could still turn around and go home, could still protect herself. Instead, she crossed the street and walked through the doors. This is where our story comes full circle, where the woman in emerald walked into an auditorium full of people who didn't know her name, Or a billionaire saw his ex-wife for the first time in 7 years and dropped his champagne glass. Or a daughter looked up and saw her mother and felt the weight of 7 years of guilt crash down all at once. But you already know how that moment felt. You've already seen the beginning. Now let me show you what happened next. Now let me show you what justice looks like when it's not about revenge. When it's about a woman simply existing in her own power and letting that existence speak louder than any words ever could. Before we continue with what happens in that auditorium, I need you to do something. Think about the person who hurt you most. The one who took from you. The one who made you feel invisible. Now imagine facing them years later. Stronger, rebuilt, unbreakable. How would that feel? Tell me in the comments. And if you're feeling this story, if Isla's journey is resonating with you, hit that like button. Let's get this to 10,000 likes for everyone who has ever had to rebuild themselves from nothing. Because that's what we do here at Mr. Hearthline Stories. We tell the truth about survival. Now, back to the auditorium. The lobby of the Meridian Center was already filled with people when Isla entered. Architectural elite in their finest. Critics carrying journals. Students hoping to network. The air buzzed with conversation and ambition and the particular energy that comes from gatherings of successful people. Isla moved through them like a ghost. No one recognized her. Why would they? Isla Moreau had never existed in this world. They knew Cross Development. They knew Damien Cross. They knew Vivian Cross, the rising star. The woman who had actually created the work being celebrated tonight was invisible. Some things never changed. She made her way to the auditorium, found a seat in the back row, far from the VIP section at the front, where she assumed Damien and Vivian would sit. She wanted to observe without being observed, wanted to see without being seen. But the moment she sat down, she felt eyes on her. A woman 3 rows ahead had turned around, was staring. Then another person looked, and another. Whispers rippled through the nearby seats like a stone dropped in still water. Is that? No, it can't be. I heard she disappeared years ago. That's his ex-wife. I thought she was gone. She's here. The whispers grew louder. More people turning to look, trying to be subtle and failing. Isla sat calmly, hands folded in her lap, face composed. Let them look. Let them whisper. She had nothing to hide. At the front of the auditorium, movement. The side door opened. Damien Cross entered, surrounded by his usual entourage. Assistants, handlers, people whose jobs consisted of orbiting him and making his life run smoothly. He looked older. His dark hair was more silver than she remembered. His face had new lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes. But he still moved with that commanding presence, still wore authority like it was tailored specifically for him. He was scanning the room, looking for investors probably, for critics, for anyone important. His eyes swept across the crowd with that practiced dismissiveness he had perfected over decades. Then they landed on Isla, and Damien Cross froze. Completely, utterly, frozen. His face drained of color so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again without producing sound. The tablet he had been holding slipped from his fingers and clattered to the marble floor. The sound echoed through the auditorium like a gunshot. Everyone turned to look. His hands began to shake. Actual visible tremors. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He looked like a man seeing his own death walking toward him, or perhaps seeing his own judgment. Standing at the back of the auditorium, in an emerald dress that caught the light, calm and still, and utterly composed. "Sir," one of his assistants said, concern creeping into his voice. "Are you all right?" "Sir." Damien didn't answer, couldn't answer. His entire focus was on Isla. He took one step toward her, stopped, took another step, stopped again, like a man walking through a minefield, terrified of what might explode beneath his feet. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Hundreds of people watching this strange, tense moment without fully understanding its significance. But they could feel it, the weight of it, the history in it. Isla remained seated, unmoving, unmoved. Let him come to her. Let him cross the distance. Let him be the one who had to move. Before Damien could take another step, the side door opened again, and Vivian entered. She looked stunning, young and polished in a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than Isla's monthly rent. Her dark hair was swept back in an elegant style. She was glowing with pre-ceremony excitement. scanning the crowd with a confident smile. Then she saw her mother. The change was instantaneous and devastating. Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. Color drained from her face. She stopped moving so abruptly that the person behind her nearly collided with her back. "Mom." The word came out as a whisper, but in the silent auditorium, it carried like a shout. "Hello, Vivian," Isla said quietly. Her voice was steady, giving nothing away. "Congratulations on your award." Vivian stood frozen, 20 feet away from her mother, her mouth working soundlessly, tears gathering in her eyes, threatening to spill and ruin her carefully applied makeup. "You came," Vivian finally managed. "I didn't think. I couldn't believe. You actually came. You invited me," Isla said simply. "I know, but I thought," Vivian's voice broke, "I thought you would never want to see me again. I thought I had destroyed that possibility. I thought." The auditorium was completely still. Every person present understood they were witnessing something significant, something private being exposed in the most public possible way. Phones were out now, recording. This would be news by morning. Isla stood slowly, gracefully. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. She walked down the aisle toward her daughter with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the silence, each step deliberate, unhurried. When she reached Vivienne, she stopped just beyond arm's reach, close enough to see the tears spilling down her daughter's face, close enough to see the guilt and shame and desperate hope written across features that looked so much like her own, close enough to smell her perfume, something expensive and unfamiliar. "This is your moment," Isla said gently. "Don't let me ruin it." "You're not ruining it," Vivian sobbed. "You being here is—" She couldn't finish the sentence, just stood there crying openly now, mascara running, composure completely shattered. Behind them, Damien had finally managed to move. He approached, slowly, looking worse up close, haggard, aged beyond what 7 years should have done. His hands still trembling. "Isla," he said. Just her name, rough in his throat like he hadn't said it in 7 years, and had forgotten how it felt in his mouth. She turned to him slowly, met his eyes, let him see her fully, not the diminished woman he had erased, but the one who had rebuilt herself from ashes, the one who had survived. "Damien," she acknowledged. Nothing more, no warmth, no coldness, just acknowledgement. "You." He struggled to form words. "You look different." "I am different," Isla said. "Why are you here?" he asked, not accusatory, genuinely confused, like he couldn't comprehend why the ghost he had created would return to haunt him. "I was invited," Isla replied calmly. "But you," he swallowed hard. "We need to talk. Please. There are things I need to say to you. Things I should have said 7 years ago. Things I—" "Then say them," Isla interrupted. "I'm listening." But Damien couldn't speak. With everyone watching, with hundreds of eyes on him, with phones recording, the man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals couldn't form a single coherent sentence. Isla waited. Let the silence stretch. Let him feel the weight of it. Let him understand what it felt like to have words trapped inside and no way to get them out. "This is exactly how you made me feel," she said quietly. "For months, you made me stand there with things to say and no one willing to listen. So take your time. I can wait." Around them, the whispers had started again. Soft but building. People pulling out phones, texting, making calls. The story was already spreading. Damien Cross's ex-wife had returned. The woman who disappeared 7 years ago was here. And she looked nothing like the supportive housewife he had reduced her to. She looked powerful. Finally, it was Vivian who broke, who couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned to face the auditorium full of watching people. Her voice rose, strong despite the tears. "Do you all want to know the truth about my award?" she said. "About the sustainable urban development work I'm being honored for tonight?" "Vivian, don't," Damien said sharply, fear in his voice now. "No." Vivian's voice grew louder. "No more protecting our lies. No more pretending." She looked at Isla, looked at her mother with eyes full of 7 years of guilt. "This work isn't mine. The innovations, the designs, the vision, none of it is mine." The auditorium erupted in whispers. "It's hers," Vivian pointed at Isla. My mother, Isla Moreau. She created everything cross-development is known for. Every sustainable design, every innovation, every award my father has received in the last 25 years. It was her work, and we took credit for it. We erased her from her own creations. We let the world believe my father was the genius, and then we let them believe I was following in his footsteps, when really I was just continuing to steal from her. Vivian, stop, Damien hissed. His face had gone gray. Stop talking. Why? Vivian laughed, bitter and broken. So we can keep pretending. So we can keep building careers on theft. I'm done pretending, Dad. I'm done carrying this guilt. I'm done lying. She turned back to Isla. I was 23 when you left, young and stupid, and so desperate for Dad's approval that I let him convince me you didn't matter, that your work was our family legacy and individual credit was selfishness. She sobbed. I believed him because it was easier than standing up for you, and I have hated myself every single day since. Isla felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that, but maybe understanding, recognition of how poison spreads, how cruelty teaches itself to the next generation. You were young, Isla said quietly. He was your father. I understand how that happens. Understanding doesn't mean I deserve forgiveness, Vivian said. No, Isla agreed. It doesn't. And then Damien moved. Suddenly, dramatically, he dropped to his knees on the marble floor. Right there in front of everyone, the gasps from the crowd were audible. Shock rippling through the auditorium like a wave. Damien Cross, billionaire, architectural mogul, untouchable force, on his knees. Isla, please, he said, his voice breaking. Please, listen. Everything Vivian said is true, worse than true. I stole from you. I erased you. I took your genius and wore it like I had earned it. And when you started asking for credit, for basic acknowledgement, I convinced myself you were being difficult, that you didn't understand business, that you should be grateful for my platform. He was crying now, tears running down his face unchecked, in front of hundreds of people, in front of cameras, in front of everyone who had spent years believing he was untouchable. But the truth is, I was terrified, he said. Terrified that if people knew the work was yours, they would realize I was nothing without you, that my reputation was built on your talent, that I was a fraud wearing a genius's stolen crown. His hands clenched into fists against the marble floor. And instead of honoring you, thanking you, sharing the credit you deserved, I erased you more completely, made you invisible, convinced myself and everyone else that you were just support at home. The auditorium was dead silent now. Every phone was out, recording. This confession would be tomorrow's headline, would destroy everything Damien had built. His reputation, his firm, his carefully constructed image. And he kept speaking anyway. 7 years ago when you left, I told myself it was your choice, Damien said, that you had abandoned us. I convinced Vivian of the same lie. But the truth is, I drove you away. I made your existence so painful, your erasure so complete, that leaving was survival. He looked up at her, his face destroyed. And I'm sorry, God, Isla. I'm so sorry. Not because you're here, not because I'm being exposed, but because I finally understand what I did to you. And it's been killing me, every day for 7 years. Isla looked down at him, this man who had stolen her life, who had worn her work like costume jewelry, who had convinced their daughter to do the same. She felt no satisfaction in seeing him broken, no pleasure in his tears, just exhaustion, deep and bone-tired. Stand up, Damien, she said quietly. Not until you, he began. Stand up, she said again, steel in her voice this time. He stood shakily, looking diminished despite his expensive suit, despite his height, despite everything he still had. He looked smaller somehow. I came here tonight because your daughter asked me to, Isla said. Her voice carried through the silent auditorium, every person leaning forward to hear. I came to see what you built on the foundation of my erasure. I came to witness my own work celebrated under someone else's name. She paused. Let the words settle. Let them understand. But I also came because I needed to see if I could stand in the same room with you and remain whole. If I could face what you did to me and not shatter. If 7 years of rebuilding was enough to protect me from you. And, Damien whispered, his voice barely audible, can you? Isla looked at him, then at Vivian, then at the hundreds of watching faces. Yes, she said simply. I can, because I rebuilt myself into something you cannot break anymore. Something that doesn't need your acknowledgement or your platforms or your stolen credit. I know who I am now. I know what I created, and your theft doesn't change that truth. She turned to Vivian. You asked me to be here for this moment, so I'm here, but understand, I am not here to forgive you. I am not here to make this easier. I am here because I am strong enough now to watch you receive an award for my work and not let it destroy me. That is my victory. Not your apology, not his confession, my own unbreakable survival. Vivian nodded through her tears. I understand. I don't deserve more than that. No, Isla agreed. You don't. The ceremony coordinator appeared then. A woman in her 50s with a clipboard and a panicked expression. She looked between Isla and Vivian and Damien like she was trying to solve an impossible equation. We need to. The program is supposed to. People are waiting for. Cancel the award, Vivian said suddenly, her voice clear and strong. What? The coordinator blinked. I don't. What do you mean, cancel? I mean, I am declining the honor, Vivian said. She pulled her acceptance speech from her pocket, pages she had probably spent weeks writing, and handed them to the stunned coordinator. I cannot accept an award for work that is not mine. Not anymore. Not ever again. But the ceremony, the coordinator stammered. The sponsors, the media, everyone is here for a lie, Vivian interrupted. Everyone is here for a lie, and I am done lying. She turned to face the auditorium again, raised her voice so everyone could hear. I am sorry to everyone who came tonight expecting a celebration. What you are getting instead is truth. And sometimes truth ruins everything pretty. Sometimes truth destroys carefully constructed narratives. Sometimes truth costs you everything you thought you had earned. She looked at Isla one more time. But it is better than living a lie. It is better than stealing from the person who gave me life. It is better than becoming the kind of person who can look in the mirror and see a thief. The auditorium exploded, not with applause, with chaos. Reporters rushing forward, phones out, questions being shouted. What does this mean for cross-development? Will there be legal action? Is this admission of fraud? How long has this been going on? Security tried to create barriers, to protect Damien and Vivian from the onslaught. But Isla, no one tried to protect Isla because no one saw her as needing protection. She was not the scandal. She was not the story. She was just the woman who had been wronged, which meant she could move freely. Isla turned and walked back up the aisle, away from Damien still standing there looking destroyed, away from Vivian trying to answer reporters' questions, away from the chaos and the cameras and the collapse of everything they had built on her stolen foundation. She walked calmly, unhurried, head high, the emerald dress moving around her like water. People parted to let her through. Some reached out as if to touch her, to offer support or condolence or connection. She moved past them all. This moment was hers. The walk away, the exit, the final word written in silence. She pushed through the auditorium doors into the lobby. The space was quieter here, but filling up fast as words spread about what was happening inside. More people arriving, more cameras, more chaos building. A young woman with a notepad caught up with her. Isla could see the hunger in her eyes, the eagerness of a journalist who had just stumbled onto the story of the year. Miss Moreau, she called. Please, can I ask you, what are you going to do now? Will you reclaim credit for your work? Will you sue? Will you demand recognition? Isla stopped, looked at this young woman who reminded her a little of herself at that age, full of questions and certainty that answers mattered. I am going to go home, Isla said simply. I am going to wake up tomorrow in the life I built for myself. I am going to design buildings for people who cannot afford star architects. I am going to teach students who need someone to believe in them. I am going to create spaces that serve communities everyone else has overlooked. And I am going to know every single day exactly who I am and what I am worth. But what about them? The journalist pressed. What about justice? What about making them pay for what they did? Isla smiled, small and genuine and hard-earned. I already have justice. I survived. I rebuilt. I walked into that auditorium and they fell apart while I remained whole. That is justice. That is victory. Them acknowledging the theft publicly. That is just confirmation of what I already knew. She walked away before the journalist could ask more questions. Pushed through the front doors of the Meridian Center out into the cool Manhattan evening. The city spread before her, all light and noise and infinite possibility, and standing at the corner beneath a streetlight was Mira. She had insisted on coming, on waiting outside in case Isla needed a friend. She was still in her work clothes, jeans and a Revive Cafe t-shirt, completely out of place among the evening gowns and tuxedos. But when Isla saw her, she felt something in her chest loosen, relief maybe, or gratitude, or just the simple comfort of knowing someone had shown up for her. "How did it go?" Mira asked when Isla reached her. "Exactly how it needed to," Isla replied. They started walking together, two women in very different clothes navigating Manhattan like it belonged to them. Behind them, the Meridian Center was chaos. Behind them, Damien Cross was facing reporters' questions about fraud and theft. Behind them, Vivian was starting the long, painful process of untangling her identity from her father's lies. But ahead of them, the city glittered with possibility. "Are you okay?" Mira asked as they descended into the subway station. Isla considered the question, checked herself for damage, for cracks, for wounds reopened. She found herself surprisingly intact. "Yeah," she said, surprised by how true it felt. "I actually am." They rode the train back to Queens, back to their neighborhood, back to the life Isla had built from nothing. The other passengers barely glanced at the woman in the emerald evening gown sitting next to someone in a cafe t-shirt. This was New York. Everyone had their story. Everyone was coming from something or going towards something. When Isla finally got home to her apartment, she stood at her window looking out at the neighborhood she had come to love. Small buildings instead of skyscrapers, community instead of prestige, truth instead of performance. She could see Revive Cafe down below, could see the bodega on the corner where she bought groceries, could see the community center where she taught design classes to teenagers. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she had deleted years ago but still recognized. "Vivian, I know you do not want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you, but I am going to spend the rest of my life making this right. Not for forgiveness. I do not deserve forgiveness, just because it is what I should have done 7 years ago. Thank you for being stronger than I ever was. Thank you for surviving us. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like even when it costs you everything." Isla read the message 3 times. She did not respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she did not delete it either. She saved it, put the phone down, returned to looking out her window. Some doors stayed closed forever. Others opened slowly, painfully, over years of proving they were safe to walk through again. She did not know which this would be. Did not know if she would ever have a relationship with her daughter again. Did not know if forgiveness was possible or even desirable. But she knew she had survived the worst they could do to her, had walked back into the fire and emerged unburned, had faced her destroyers and remained whole. And that knowledge felt like power. The next morning, Isla woke up to her phone ringing. The sun was just starting to come up. She had slept deeply, dreamlessly, the kind of sleep that comes after something has been completed. The caller ID showed Kamal Rahman. She answered. "Hello, have you seen the news?" he asked. No preamble, no greeting, just straight to it. "No, I just woke up." "Turn on your computer. Look at literally any news site. Look at social media. Isla, you are everywhere." She opened her laptop, pulled up the first news site that came to mind, and there it was, front page, above the fold, a photograph of her walking out of the Meridian Center, head high, emerald dress catching the light. The headline read, "Architectural Fraud Exposed. Isla Moreau, the genius behind Cross Development." There were videos, clips from the ceremony, Damien dropping his champagne glass, Vivian's confession, his public breakdown, all of it recorded and now going viral. Comment sections filled with thousands of responses, support for Isla, outrage at Damien, calls for investigations. Her email inbox was flooded. Reporters requesting interviews, architectural firms offering positions, former colleagues she had not heard from in decades reaching out. Everyone suddenly wanted to talk to Isla Moreau. What are you going to do? Kamal asked. Isla closed her laptop. The same thing I was going to do yesterday. Come to work. Finish the community center design. Teach my class tonight. Live my life. Kamal laughed. Isla, you understand what this means. You could have any position you want now. Any firm would hire you. You could start your own practice. You could demand recognition. Demand compensation for everything they stole. You could. I could do a lot of things, Isla interrupted gently. But I built a life here. I built something that matters. And I am not interested in returning to that world just because they suddenly decided I exist. You are remarkable, Kamal said. You know that. I am stubborn, Isla corrected. There is a difference. She went to work, rode the subway like always, stopped at Revive for coffee like always. Mira took one look at her and said, You are famous. You know you are famous right now. I know, Isla said. And you are here ordering coffee. I need coffee, Isla said simply. Fame does not change that. Mira laughed and made her usual order. On the house today, for the genius who took down a billionaire just by showing up. I did not take him down, Isla said. He took himself down. I just existed. Yeah, Mira said, and your existence was enough to shatter everything. That is power. At Rahman and Associates, the small staff greeted her with applause when she walked in. Someone had brought bagels. Someone else had printed out the news articles and posted them around the office like decorations. Kamal stood at the center of it all looking proud. We always knew you were brilliant, he said. Now everyone else knows it too. The work is the same either way, Isla said. Can we get to it? They worked, reviewed the community center plans, discussed modifications, solved problems, did the actual work of architecture instead of the performance of it. And Isla found herself grateful for this space, for people who had valued her before the world decided she mattered. Her phone kept ringing. She ignored most of it, but one call came from a number she did not recognize with a Manhattan area code. Something made her answer. Hello, Miss Moreau, a woman's voice said. Professional, crisp. My name is Andrea Liu. I am an attorney specializing in intellectual property theft. I watched what happened last night. And I would like to offer my services pro bono to help you reclaim legal ownership of your work. Isla sat down. That is very generous, but I am not sure I want to pursue legal action. Miss Moreau, Andrea said gently. I understand you have moved on. I understand you have built a new life. But what was done to you was not just morally wrong. It was legally actionable. And if you do not assert your rights, if you do not reclaim ownership of your intellectual property, cross-development will continue to profit from your work. They will continue to build on your stolen foundation. Isla had not thought about that, had been so focused on her own healing that she had not considered the ongoing theft. Even now, even exposed, her designs were still being used, still making money, still credited to Damien. I will think about it, Isla said. That is all I ask, Andrea replied. I will send you my information. When you are ready to talk, I will be here. The call ended. Isla sat at her desk staring at her current project. A small library expansion, modest budget, serving a community that needed more space for their children to learn. This was her work now. This was what mattered. But Andrea was right. If she did nothing, the theft continued. Not just of her past work, but her legacy, her contributions to architecture. Everything she had created would remain attributed to a man who had stolen it. That evening, Isla taught her class at the community college. Urban Design for Accessible Communities. 23 students, mostly people of color, mostly from working-class backgrounds, people who could not afford prestigious architecture schools but had vision and passion and deserved someone to invest in them. She walked into the classroom and every single student stood up, started applauding. They had seen the news, had seen their teacher exposed as the genius behind cross-development, had watched her walk into that auditorium and face down the people who had stolen from her. Miss Moreau, one of her students said, a young woman named Jasmine who wanted to design affordable housing in the Bronx. You are incredible. I am your teacher, Isla said. Same as yesterday. Same as I will be next week. Can we please get to work? But the students wanted to talk about it, wanted to know how she had survived, how she had rebuilt, how she had walked into that ceremony knowing what it would cost her emotionally. So Isla told them the truth. I survived by remembering that my worth is not determined by who sees it. I rebuilt by doing the work, not for recognition, not for credit, but because the work matters, because design serves people, because creating spaces that honor dignity and community is valuable whether anyone knows my name or not. She paused. Let them absorb that. And I walked into that ceremony not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to destroy them, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was strong enough, that they had not broken me, that I could face the worst thing that ever happened to me and remain whole. How do you do that? Jasmine asked quietly. How do you stay whole when people try to erase you? Isla thought about that. Really thought about it. You remember who you were before they tried to erase you. You hold on to the part of yourself that is true regardless of what anyone else says or does or believes. You build a life on your own terms, and you refuse, absolutely refuse, to let their blindness determine your value. The class was quiet, absorbing, learning not just about urban design but about survival, about integrity, about what it meant to know your worth even when the world refused to see it. After class, several students stayed to talk, to thank her, to share their own stories of being overlooked or dismissed or told they did not matter. Isla listened to each one, offered what wisdom she could, reminded them that they were architects not just of buildings but of their own lives. When she finally left the college, it was almost 9. She was tired, emotionally drained, ready to go home and be alone. But her phone rang again. This time, a number she definitely recognized. Damien. She almost did not answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. She answered. Hello, Isla. His voice was rough, strained, like he had been crying or shouting or both. First, can we please talk? Please. I need to explain. You explained last night, Isla said, in front of 700 people. What else is there to say? I need you to understand. I never meant. I did not realize what I was doing to you. I did not see. That is the problem, Damien, Isla interrupted. You did not see me. For years you did not see me. And now that everyone else sees me, you suddenly want to explain. You want me to understand. You want absolution. She took a breath. But I do not have that to give you. I do not have forgiveness or understanding or anything else you think you need from me. I have my own life now, my own work, my own purpose, and it does not include carrying your guilt for you. I am not asking you to carry my guilt, Damien said. I am asking. I do not know what I am asking. I cannot live with this, Isla. I cannot breathe. Since you left, I have been. He could not finish, just broke down. Isla listened to him cry. This man who had never cried, who had built his entire identity around being unbreakable, who had taught their daughter that emotion was weakness and control was everything. He was sobbing into the phone like a child, and she felt, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. He was experiencing what she had experienced. The collapse of everything you thought you were, the realization that you had built your life on lies, the weight of consequences you never thought you would face. Damien, she said quietly, when his crying subsided, I survived what you did to me. You will survive what you did to yourself, but you will have to do it the same way I did, by accepting responsibility, by building something true instead of something stolen, by learning to live with the consequences of your choices. How? He asked. How do I do that? I do not know, Isla said honestly. I only know how I did it. And my path is not yours. Will you? He struggled. Will I ever see you again? I do not know that either, Isla said. Right now I need distance. I need space. I need to protect the peace I have built. But maybe, someday, if you do the work of becoming someone different, someone honest, maybe then we can exist in the same space without it destroying me. That is more than I deserve, Damien whispered. Yes, Isla agreed. It is. She ended the call, stood on the street corner outside the community college. The city moved around her. Taxis honking, people rushing, the subway rumbling beneath her feet. Life continuing, regardless of private pain. Her phone rang again immediately. Vivian this time. Hila stared at the screen, debated, answered. Hello. Mom, Vivian's voice was thick with crying. Please do not hang up. Please just listen for 1 minute. I am listening, Isla said. I quit, Vivian said. I quit cross-development. I resigned this morning. I cannot. I will not continue to profit from stealing from you. I will not be that person anymore. What will you do? Isla asked. I do not know, Vivian admitted. Start over, I guess. Figure out who I am without Dad's name protecting me. Learn to stand on my own work instead of yours. Isla felt something shift in her chest again, that small crack widening. That is good, she said quietly. That is the right choice. I know you cannot forgive me, Vivian continued. I know I destroyed any right to your love, or your time, or your presence in my life. But I need you to know, I am going to spend every day trying to become someone you could be proud of. Not for you, for me. Because I cannot live with who I became. Vivian, Isla said, and her voice was softer now, gentler. You are 29 years old. You have time to become someone different, someone better. Do not waste that time trying to earn my approval. Use it to build integrity. Use it to create work that is actually yours. Use it to learn what it means to stand in your own truth. Will I ever? Vivian's voice broke. Will I ever get to be your daughter again? Isla closed her eyes, felt tears gathering for the first time since the ceremony. I do not know, she said honestly. Right now the wound is too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But you are still my daughter. That has not changed. What has changed is whether I can let you close enough to hurt me again. I understand, Vivian whispered. Give me time, Isla said. Give me space. Work on becoming someone trustworthy, and maybe someday we can try. Okay, Vivian said. Okay. Thank you, Mom. The call ended. Isla stood there with tears running down her face. Not tears of pain this time, but tears of something more complicated. Grief for what had been lost, hope for what might be possible, exhaustion from carrying this weight, relief at finally setting some of it down. She went home, climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door and stepped into her space. Her sanctuary, her life that she had built brick by brick, and she let herself cry, really cry, for the first time in 7 years. Not quiet tears into her pillow, but full-body sobs that shook her shoulders and made her gasp for breath. She cried for the woman she had been, the one who had believed in partnership and family and love. She cried for the years she had lost, the work that had been stolen, the daughter who had learned cruelty instead of compassion. But she also cried with relief, with release, with the knowledge that she had survived, that she had walked into the fire and emerged unburned, that she had faced her worst fear and it had not destroyed her. When the tears finally stopped, Isla washed her face, changed out of her work clothes, made herself tea, sat at her window and watched her neighborhood settle into night. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Mira. You okay up there? I saw you come home. Want company or want to be alone? Isla smiled, typed back. Alone tonight. But thank you for asking. Thank you for existing. Anytime, Mira replied. That is what family does. And you are family. The next few days were chaos. Interview requests flooded in. News outlets wanted her story. Architectural magazines wanted features. Everyone who had ignored her for decades suddenly wanted access. Isla declined almost everything. She agreed to one interview with a woman who wrote for a publication focused on women in architecture. The interview would be on Isla's terms, in her neighborhood, focused on her current work, not on the scandal, not on Damien, not on the theft, but on what she had built after. The interviewer, a woman named Keisha, met her at Revive Cafe. They sat at a corner table while Mira made coffee and pretended not to listen while obviously listening. Tell me about your work now, Keisha began. Not your past, not what was stolen, but what you are creating now. So Isla talked about the community library, about the affordable housing projects, about her teaching, about designing for dignity instead of prestige, about architecture as service instead of architecture as ego. Why this work? Keisha asked. You could go anywhere now. Do anything. Work for the most prestigious firms. Name your salary. Why stay here? Because this work matters, Isla said simply. Because the people I serve have been told their entire lives that they do not deserve beautiful spaces. That good design is for rich people. That architecture is not for them. And I get to prove that wrong. I get to create spaces that honor their dignity, that serve their communities, that make their lives better in tangible ways. She paused, considered, and because this work saved me, when I had nothing, when I was nobody, this work reminded me why I became an architect in the first place, not for awards or recognition or seeing my name in magazines, but because I believe everyone deserves to live in spaces that honor their humanity. Keisha smiled. That is beautiful. Can I ask, do you feel vindicated now that the truth is out? Isla thought about that. I feel relieved that I do not have to carry the secret anymore. I feel satisfied that the truth is known, but vindicated. She shook her head. Vindication implies I was fighting to prove something. I was not fighting. I was surviving. I was rebuilding. I was learning to exist without needing their acknowledgement. What do you want people to know? Keisha asked. People who might be going through their own erasure, their own invisibility. Isla looked directly at Keisha, at the recorder between them, at the lens of truth that would carry her words to whoever needed to hear them. I want them to know that your worth is inherent. It is not given to you by other people seeing it. It is not determined by who credits your work, or speaks your name, or acknowledges your contributions. You are valuable because you exist, because you create, because you contribute, regardless of whether anyone notices. She continued, and I want them to know that walking away is not giving up. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Sometimes you have to leave behind people and places and opportunities that are killing you slowly, even when it costs you everything, even when you have to start over from zero. Because staying in a place where you are invisible is a death sentence for your soul. The interview lasted 2 hours. When it was published a week later, it went viral, not because of the scandal, but because of the message. Thousands of people, mostly women, mostly people of color, mostly people who had been overlooked and undervalued and erased. They shared it. They commented. They said, "This is my story." They said, "I needed to hear this." They said, "Thank you for surviving. Thank you for showing us it is possible." Isla read the comments with tears in her eyes. All these people she would never meet. All these lives she had touched by simply telling the truth. By simply surviving and being willing to talk about it. Andrea Liu, the attorney, called again. "I saw the interview," she said. "It was powerful. Have you thought about my offer?" "I have," Isla said. "And I think I am ready to pursue reclaiming my work, not for money, not for revenge, but because those designs deserve to be attributed correctly. Because the next generation of architects deserves to know the truth about who created what. Because history should be accurate." "I agree completely," Andrea said. "Let us begin." The legal process was complicated, slow. Andrea filed petitions to have Isla's name added retroactively to every design she had created during her marriage. They gathered evidence, emails, sketches, preliminary drawings all in Isla's hand, testimony from former employees who knew the truth, documentation that proved beyond doubt that the work credited to Damien Cross had originated with Isla Moreau. Damien did not fight it, did not hire lawyers to oppose her claim. In fact, his attorneys reached out to Andrea with a settlement offer, full attribution, public acknowledgement, financial compensation for years of stolen work, and a formal apology. "He is not fighting you," Andrea said during one of their meetings. "He is cooperating fully, providing documentation, instructing Cross Development to update all records. I have never seen anything like it." Isla was not surprised. Damien's entire reputation was destroyed. His firm was hemorrhaging clients. Investors were pulling funding. He had nothing left to lose and everything to atone for. The settlement was finalized 3 months after the ceremony. Every building Isla had designed would now carry her name alongside Damien's, or in some cases instead of his. She would receive compensation, not enough to make up for what had been stolen. No amount of money could do that, but enough to acknowledge the theft, enough to say this matters. The formal apology came in the form of a press conference. Damien stood alone at a podium. No entourage, no assistants, just him looking older and smaller and broken. He read from a prepared statement, but his voice kept cracking, kept breaking. "I stole from Isla Moreau," he said. "For over 2 decades I took her work and claimed it as my own. I erased her contributions. I diminished her genius. I built an empire on the foundation of her stolen brilliance, and I convinced myself I deserved the credit. I was wrong. Completely. Inexcusably wrong. He looked directly at the camera, at the lens that would carry his words to the world. Isla, if you are watching this, I am sorry. Those words are insufficient. They cannot repair what I broke, but they are true. I am sorry for every day I made you invisible, for every project I claimed as mine, for every award I accepted for your work, for teaching our daughter that this behavior was acceptable, for destroying the best thing in my life because I was too arrogant to see its value. The press conference was covered widely. Some people accepted his apology. Some said it was too little, too late. Some said he was only sorry because he got caught. Isla did not watch it live, could not bring herself to. But Mira showed her clips later. What do you think? Mira asked. Is it real? I think his pain is real, Isla said. Whether his change is real, that will take years to know. But I do not need to know. His journey is not mine anymore. Vivian reached out regularly, not demanding time or forgiveness, just small messages, updates on her life. She had gotten a job at a small sustainable design firm, entry level, no special treatment. She was learning to do the work without her father's name opening doors, learning what it meant to earn respect instead of inheriting it. I am starting therapy, one message said, trying to understand how I became someone capable of such cruelty, trying to unlearn the lessons Dad taught me about power and value. Isla responded occasionally, brief messages, encouraging but boundaried. I am glad you are doing that work. Keep going. Months passed, then a year. The viral moment of the ceremony faded from public consciousness. Other scandals took its place. Other stories dominated the news cycle, but the impact remained. Architecture schools added Isla's work to their curriculum. Students studied her sustainable designs under her name. Articles analyzing her contributions appeared in academic journals. Isla Moreau was no longer invisible, no longer erased. Her work was attributed correctly, her genius acknowledged, her legacy secured. But more importantly, she had her peace, her life, her purpose. She continued teaching, continued designing for communities that needed her, continued building spaces that honored dignity and served the overlooked. Rahman promoted her to partner. Rahman and Moreau Associates, her name on the door, her vision shaping the direction of the firm. They grew slowly, hired more staff, took on bigger projects, but always stayed true to their mission. Architecture for everyone, not just for those who could afford prestige. 2 years after the ceremony, Isla received an invitation. The American Institute of Architecture wanted to honor her. Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to sustainable urban development, for innovations that changed the field, for integrity that inspired the next generation. She almost declined, almost said she did not need their validation. But then she thought about her students, about young architects who needed to see someone like her honored, someone who had survived erasure and rebuilt, someone who proved that integrity mattered more than prestige. So she accepted, went to the ceremony, this time at a different venue, with no ghosts waiting to ambush her. Just an auditorium full of people gathered specifically to honor her work, her vision, her name. When they called her to the stage, the applause was thunderous. Standing ovation, 700 people on their feet, celebrating not just her designs, but her survival, her courage, her refusal to stay erased. Isla stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd, saw her students in the audience, saw Kamal and Mira, saw colleagues and friends and people who had supported her, rebuilding. And in the back, far in the back, she saw Vivian. Her daughter had come, had not announced her presence, had just come to witness her mother being honored. Their eyes met across the distance. Vivian was crying, smiling through tears, applauding harder than anyone. Isla felt her own tears gathering, but she blinked them back, focused on the moment, on the speech she had prepared. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and strong. "Thank you for this honor. Thank you for seeing my work, for attributing it correctly, for teaching the next generation the truth about who created what." She paused, "But I want to talk about what this award really means, not just to me, but to every person who has ever been made invisible, Every person whose work has been stolen. Every person who has been told they do not matter. The room went quiet. Listening, this award says you do matter. Your contributions are valuable. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your name deserves to be spoken. Your genius deserves recognition. She continued. But more than that, I want to tell you that you do not need an award to know your worth. You do not need public acknowledgement to validate your contributions. You do not need anyone's permission to know you are valuable. I spent 7 years rebuilding my life in obscurity. No one knew my name. No one celebrated my work. I designed libraries for communities who could not pay me. I taught students no one else would invest in. I created spaces that would never make magazines. And that work was just as valuable as anything I am being honored for tonight. Because value is not determined by who sees it. Value is inherent. The applause started again, loud and sustained. Isla waited for it to quiet. To everyone who is invisible right now. To everyone whose work is being stolen. To everyone who is being erased by people who should honor you. I want you to know this. You can survive. You can rebuild. You can walk away from people and places that diminish you. And you can create a life that is smaller in scope, but infinitely richer in truth. She looked directly at Vivian in the back, and to the people who do the erasing, who steal and diminish and claim credit for work that is not theirs. Change is possible. Redemption is possible, but it requires honesty. It requires work. It requires being willing to lose everything you built on lies in order to build something true. The ceremony concluded with more applause, more celebration. People wanted to talk to her, to congratulate her, to share their own stories of invisibility and survival. Isla listened to each one, offered what wisdom she could, reminded them that they were not alone. When the crowd finally thinned, when most people had left, Vivian approached, slowly, hesitantly, like someone approaching something fragile that might break. "Mom," she said quietly. That speech, it was. She could not find words. "Thank you for coming," Isla said. "It means something that you came." "I will always come," Vivian said, "even if you never want to speak to me again. Even if I am only ever in the back of the room. I will show up. I will bear witness to your brilliance. Because that is the least I can do." Isla looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. Vivian had changed too. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement erased. She looked humbler, more genuine, more like the girl Isla remembered before everything went wrong. "Would you like to get coffee?" Isla asked. "Just coffee. Nothing more. But maybe we can start there." Vivian's face transformed, hope flooding in. "Yes," she said. "Yes, please. I would love that." They went to a small cafe near the venue, sat across from each other, awkward at first. Years of hurt between them, years of silence. But slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Not about the past, not yet. That was too heavy. But about now, about Vivian's work, about Isla's teaching, about small safe things that let them remember how to be in each other's presence. It was not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe never fully, but it was a beginning. A small fragile possibility that maybe, someday, they could rebuild what had been destroyed. When they parted, Vivian hugged her mother. Brief, tentative, Isla let herself hug back, let herself feel the complicated tangle of love and pain and hope that came with holding her daughter again. "Thank you," Vivian whispered, "for giving me a chance, for not giving up on the possibility of me." Isla pulled back, looked her daughter in the eyes. "I am giving you a chance to prove change is real, to show me through actions, not words, that you have become someone different. Do not waste it." "I won't," Vivian promised. "I swear I won't." That night, Isla returned to her apartment in Queens, to her modest space, to her life that had no resemblance to the penthouse she had left behind. She stood at her window like she had so many nights before, watching her neighborhood, watching her city. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of her students. "Miss Moreau, I saw your speech online. I have watched it 5 times. You said exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you for teaching us that our worth is not up for debate. Thank you for showing us what survival looks like." Isla smiled, typed back. "Thank you for being willing to learn. Thank you for doing the work. Keep going. The world needs your voice. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: the erasure, the theft, the abandonment, the painful rebuilding, the slow reclamation of self, the ceremony that had shattered everything, the legal battle, the public acknowledgement, the beginning of possible reconciliation with her daughter. All of it had been necessary. All of it had shaped her. All of it had taught her what she was made of. And what she was made of was stronger than anything that had tried to break her. Isla Moreau, architect, teacher, survivor, woman who had been erased and had rebuilt herself anyway, woman who had walked into the fire and emerged transformed, woman who knew her worth whether anyone else acknowledged it or not. She had won, not by destroying them, not by revenge, but by surviving, by refusing to stay broken, by building a life so true and so full of purpose that their theft could not diminish it. That was power, real power, the kind that came from within, the kind that could not be stolen or erased or destroyed, the kind that endured. So here is what I want you to take from Isla's story. Every single person watching this right now, listening to these words, feeling the weight of your own erasure or invisibility or stolen credit, here is what you need to know. Your worth is not up for debate. It is not determined by who sees you or acknowledges you or gives you credit. Your value is inherent. It exists because you exist, because you create, because you contribute, because you matter. And if you are in a place right now where people are making you invisible, where your work is being stolen, where you are being diminished and dismissed and erased, you have options. You can fight. You can leave. You can rebuild. You can survive. It will not be easy. Rebuilding from nothing never is. Starting over from zero is brutal. Walking away from everything you know is terrifying. But it is possible. Isla did it. And so can you. Because you are not defined by the people who could not see your value. You are not diminished by those who stole from you. And you are absolutely powerful enough to rebuild yourself into something unbreakable. If this story moved you, if Isla's journey resonated with you, if you needed to hear that survival is possible, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Someone who is invisible in their own life. Someone who is being erased. Someone who needs to know they can survive. And tell me in the comments, what are you rebuilding in your life right now? What are you walking away from? What are you reclaiming? Because your story matters. Your journey matters. Your survival matters. Subscribe to Mr. Hearthline Stories, because we're building a community here. A family of survivors, of fighters, of people who refuse to stay broken, of people who know their worth even when the world is blind to it. And remember this, the people who tried to erase you, they do not get to write the end of your story. You do, and your ending can be powerful, can be triumphant, can be proof that you were always unbreakable. Isla Moreau walked away with nothing and built everything that mattered. She faced the people who destroyed her and remained whole. She stood in rooms that had once erased her and filled them with her undeniable presence. And 7 years after disappearing, she stunned them, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the simple, devastating power of having survived them, of having become someone they could not break, of knowing her worth so completely that their blindness to it no longer mattered. That is victory. That is justice. That is power. Your worth has never been up for debate. You have always been enough. You have always mattered. You have always been valuable, regardless of who saw it, regardless of who acknowledged it, regardless of who tried to steal it. Remember that. Hold on to that. Build your life on that truth. And when people try to make you invisible, when they try to erase you, when they try to steal your light and claim it as their own, walk away, rebuild, survive, and come back so undeniably powerful that your mere existence shatters everything they built on your stolen foundation. This is Mr. Hearthline Stories, telling you the truth about survival, about strength, about the unbreakable power of knowing who you are. I will see you in the next story. Until then, stand tall, take up space, and never let anyone make you smaller than you are. You are enough. You have always been enough. And your story is not over yet.